Oh, we're still. All right. Well, the time is 1:30, according to my clock, anyways. And we are at the regular board meeting of the Sunshine Coast Regional District on Thursday, October the 10th, 2019. World Mental Health Day, by the way. Yes. And my parents' 49th anniversary, too, so yay them. But was it your 43rd yesterday? Okay. I'd like to welcome everyone and thank you for being here today. I would like to acknowledge that we are within the territory of the Sechelt First Nation. And we have an amended agenda in front of you today, so may I ask for a motion to adopt the amended agenda? So moved and seconded? Seconded? All those in favor? Sorry, just one. It was on front of the pink papers, Director McMahon. Oh, you know what? That is a good point. So we are going to put it under new business. One item under new business. So I guess it'll be number 11. And it is going to be director's meeting compensation. Is there any other amendments to make to the amended agenda? I'm looking around the table. May I have Director McMahon, I'm assuming you moved that amendment. Seconded. All those in favor of the amendment? Okay. Are there any other further amendments? Seeing none, I'll call the question on the amendment. All those in favor? Motion carries. Now we have a motion to adopt the amended agenda. As amended? Oh my gosh, so moved. And, we're going to call the question on the amended agenda. All those in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. Sometimes. Okay, so next item is our regular board meeting minutes of September 12th, 2019, Annex A, pages 1 to 11. I'm going to ask for a motion to adopt. So moved. Seconded. Are there any errors, omissions, adjustments that need to be made on those minutes? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Motion carries. Any business arising from the minutes or unfinished business? Seeing none, we will carry on with presentations and delegations. Now, I guess maybe I should have amended this on the amended agenda, but it will actually be Dave Robbins of the Better Fields Committee that will be presenting for us today regarding the quality of better playing fields. And I'm going to ask for a motion to receive the reports or the documents that have been provided, as well as the addition of 22A through E, which are a couple of missing pages, as well as 22E is a list of suggestions from the delegation. So if I could have a motion to receive, so moved, seconded. All those in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. And Mr. Robbins, you can come up to the mic. You're welcome. And there should be a talking head on there that you can press, and when the light comes on, the floor is yours.
I think the light is on. There we go.
Oh, okay.
This is my first time presenting to the SCRD. I don't know if there are any formalities, but I want to thank you for receiving me as a representative of the Better Fields Committee. So if you're all willing to play with me for a minute here, as that's one of the things we do on fields, I would love for you to picture a group of kids on a field learning to simply pass a soccer ball. But they can't, because large tufts of grass change the direction of the ball. Or a young baseball player fielding a ground ball and at the last minute the ball takes a bad bounce and chips her tooth or breaks his nose, again because of the uneven surface. Lastly, I would love for you to imagine being a sports coach hosting an off-coast team. You apologize for the horrible condition of the field. You assure them you'll ask for it to be fixed again, and you hope it isn't reported to the league. Unfortunately, this is our reality. Over the past 2 decades, the sports fields on the Sunshine Coast have worsened. The result of our fields being deemed below minimum league standards will be our kids needing to play all their games off-coast every weekend. No more home games, and all due to a lack of safe, adequate fields. And this is a serious concern right now. It has been many years since Sunshine Coast fields were considered a government priority beyond minimal upkeep. We realize you are dealing with complex uncertainties in water supply and waste management, but this does not have to result in the neglect of fields and recreation. Fixing our fields also carries costs to taxpayers, but the work and benefits are tangible. They have the potential to present a picture of community health and vitality and organizational pride that can help create a legacy for this board. Funding has been an issue, as well as a lack of intergovernmental cooperation to share equipment and knowledge. But an added bonus of making fields a priority again is that in this function, the SCRD is not on its own. There is great community building capacity for intergovernmental cooperation, intergenerational engagement of our sports organizations, and fundraising assistance. Your board and municipalities have inherited a dismal situation, but you also have a wonderful opportunity to turn it around. To make up for these years of neglect by investing in our children, our health, and our community. At this meeting, we request that the SCRD revise your strategic plan to recognize the priority of fields maintenance and improvements. We are also circulating a list of other suggestions we are hoping you will consider. We hope some of these suggestions can be acted upon immediately, and perhaps others can be referred to staff to explore and report back to you later this month. Thank you for your time, your consideration, and your ongoing work to make the Sunshine Coast a better place for all ages.
Thank you, Mr. Robbins. If you'd like to just stay there in the hot seat, and we'll get the silly hat for you as requested. Are there any special requirements?
Yeah. Absolutely. I'm willing to wear a hat.
I'm going to look to the board to see if there are any questions for our presenter. Okay, Director Beamish, please.
Yeah, I guess I recognize it's an important issue, and I support it fully, but is there, have you given any thought to prioritizing which fields could be done in what order, where that should start? Because it's unlikely we could do every field at once.
Yes.
So where is the need greatest, and looking at it from your perspective in that area? It could be Brothers Field and Gibson's. It could be some other field. Right. I just don't know where that priority lies.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that question. Yeah, it is something that we've been thinking about, and some of the other people on the committee might be able to answer the question more fully than I can. But the state of Shirley Macy is quite poor, and it needs a fairly significant investment to actually get it to a place where it's playable. And playable on an ongoing basis. So we were hoping to start with maintenance and repair to Cliff Gilker, and then move, and while we're doing that, so that it becomes a very playable field, allocate funding and set aside funding for a reconstruction of Shirley Macy.
All right, directors.
Sorry. One more thing to add to that.
Certainly.
In the report that we did, or in some of the documents that we did submit, it should have that in more detail and some additional options and plans.
Yes, there's a significant amount of staff reports as well as the Vinnie report on Shirley Macy specifically. And then there's the new page 22E that was handed around as part of the list. Director McMahon.
Yes, thank you. This is an issue I heard about going door to door during the last municipal election, particularly for young families on the coast. Part of the issue here, I suspect, is maintenance. You can pour a lot of money into a field, but if you don't maintain it adequately, then you're faced again with having to pour a lot of money into a field. So, my question is, do we have a capital asset maintenance plan for fields? We do for buildings. Do we do anything like that with fields?
Okay, that sounds like a question for staff to answer.
Thank you for the question, Chair. The fields as part of the Park Service are not covered by a current complete asset management plan. And so while there are funds allocated for maintenance, and those operating funds do pay for intermittent repairs beyond routine maintenance, so for example, minor drainage upgrades, irrigation system repairs, etc., field replacement is not currently budgeted for.
Thank you, GM Hall. Director Hiltz.
Thanks.
Oh, sorry. I actually had Director Seegers and then Director Hiltz.
I could wait.
No, it's all right. I want to stick to my speaking order.
How much use do the school grounds get? Or is that something that you maybe don't use because of the quality of them or not?
Well, thank you for the question. Currently, the groups that are using the public fields rather than the school board fields are not using the school board fields, but we are, as the fields the Better Fields Committee, we've been approaching the school district 46 in trying to have them prioritize field maintenance as well, and it's as part of our proposal to have all of the governments as well as SD 46 collaborate. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. And I can tell you from my tenure on the school district is the amount of resources that have been put into there are to keep them as a playing surface, not necessarily a top-level field, because the school district doesn't necessarily have the funding for that. Director Hiltz.
Thanks. It's a two-part question. Thanks to Director Seegers. The first thing, you said that the fields are below league standards. So I'm interested what those league standards are and what the soccer field would not allow the kids to play on the field if it was below a standard, like liability. What is the standard that you're talking about?
That's a great question. I haven't actually seen the specific standards themselves. I don't know if anybody else on the committee has, and they might be able to answer that component of the question. But as far as I understand it, it needs to be a completely level playing surface so that you don't end up with tusks of grass or fungus that then kills grass in between, and you get big patches that kids could then injure themselves on. So I think it does relate to liability and safety.
Grant, do you want to come up to the microphone and?
Well, you can probably hear me.
It won't get picked up though by the mic. So this is Grant Marshall, who's been involved with this, and you actually see his face in our agenda package as part of the report. So please go ahead.
Hopefully my head's not as shiny as in that photo.
It's black and white, so no.
It comes to a referee's decision, generally, at that time, and standing water is a big issue, and that's one of the biggest issues we have with fields like Shirley Macy, because the standing water can get severe enough that they can, at the time of the game, deem that it's unplayable. Obviously, a concern even if you're just driving from Seashelt to Gibson's to play soccer, but if you're coming up from the city, it's also a concern. So on a week-to-week basis, working with your staff and working with staff from the Youth Soccer Association and the Men's League and Women's League, we're moving from field to field to trying to determine which field stands the best chance of that not happening on game day. We have to make that decision usually on Thursday or Friday, getting increasingly difficult with drainage being a big issue.
So the follow-up, there's the referee's discretion of the safety of the players, that hits his discretion. But beyond that, is there like a field standard, like a provincial, a national, a sports authority that is supposed to be followed? Or insurance, any of those?
There is for the BC Soccer Association. I don't know, I have to get Ed to sit by the mic for baseball, but there probably is for baseball as well.
This was the second part question. The phrase that caught me is, those are the public fields and those are the school board fields. So I'm interested in how you see fields like public. I'm interested in what public means to you, I guess.
Great question. Thank you for that one. I guess I just made that distinction more because that what came to mind at the moment. Ultimately, we'd like to have all of the fields that are available to any citizens across the Sunshine Coast to any citizens of the Sunshine Coast. If it happens to be that the field at Elfie is the most usable and best field, then it would be open to the Sunshine Coast Youth Soccer Association, Men's League, and Women's Leagues as well.
And before I continue on the speakers list, I'm just going to ask a question of staff on how the school district fits in, the school district fields fit in with joint use, with the joint use function. If you could just provide a quick comment on that, where it falls in the agreement, if it does.
Thank you for the question, Chair. The joint use agreement between SCRD and School District 46 does include fields and would enable, for example, SCRD to book school fields for our programs, or vice versa, the school district to book SCRD fields for their students' use without incurring use fees. The other way that fields are implicated in the agreement is that the joint use agreement provides a venue for the discussion of joint priorities and the possibility for funding, shared funding, co-funding of capital projects. So that could be repairs, rebuilding, or construction of new. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. So continuing on through our speakers list, I have Director Howard and then Director Beamish. So Director Howard, please.
Thank you, Chair Pratt. I want to express my appreciation to this group for bringing this issue forward and putting the effort into the presentation. I want to share with the board that I am one of those soccer parents who is deeply embarrassed by the condition of our fields. I had the privilege of overhearing a visiting team on their return trip to the Lower Mainland. I happened to be on the ferry at the same time as them, and it was illuminating to eavesdrop, frankly, on their conversation about the field that they just played on. The characterizations were not flattering, and there was even mention of, should we even bother coming over here for these games? I think we're all on the same page that we want to provide community amenities that meet the needs of our community as a whole, including families and including youth. My view, my understanding is that fields are not treated in the same manner as hard capital assets, like the ice rink, for example. We would not allow that capital asset to degenerate or deteriorate to the point where it's not fit for play or close to not fit for play, and where it poses risk of harm to its users for good reason. It's an important capital asset. We need to maintain it. We haven't taken that same approach to our fields. We've allowed them to deteriorate, and we need to take actions to reverse that. I do have a question to the presenters. Would you be able to assist the board in understanding the question of prioritization a bit better? Two specific questions to that. Would you support identifying Shirley Macy as a near-term priority for investment in the next fiscal plan for this board, i.e. in preparation for the budget that will be prepared for this board's consideration? And as that work's undergoing, I think I heard from you that your preference would be to see resources shifted away from Shirley Macy and towards Cliff Gilker Perhaps you can expand on that a bit so this board understands the kind of, immediate, near, and medium-term priorities of your group.
Okay, to answer your first question, yes, we would like to see Shirley Macy in this upcoming budget be corrected as per the report that you have from Binney and Associates. It can't be maintained. Well, it can be maintained to the level that it is now, but it's unfit for play. So maintaining it is throwing good money at bad at this point. It's in our opinion that, and I think in Binney's opinion too in that report, that any more money put into the field is just not making the field any better. It's not even keeping it at its standard. If it was up to us, we would close the field indefinitely until it was repaired or rebuilt, and the money that is allocated to looking after that field could be put towards better use in a field like Cliff Gilker. Cliff Gilker also has some issues. It's an older field, but it does drain better, and it could stand the next 5 years or so before other fields are brought up to a level of play that is expected of fields. And then it could also undergo reconstruction at that point, which I think was brought up a few years back, that it was on the radar to be rebuilt because it was 40 years old or something. But it seems, and I think staff would agree, that it could be fit for play without too much investment right now. What was the second question again? That was it?
I think you captured them. I do have a follow-up question. I wouldn't want to drill down into the details of what steps should be taken with respect to Cliff Gilker in this meeting, but is that something that your committee could see working productively with staff on in terms of identifying, were there to be a shift of resources towards Cliff Gilker? Is that something that you would be interested in working on staff with in terms of identifying what those measures are that should be undertaken?
Yes, along with Tyler, I think it's Musgrove, is that correct, from the town of Gibsons, has acquired assistance from a few different parties for some information to help them figure out working on Brothers Park. Utilizing those contacts might be worth the SCRD investigating as well, because he's found some people, including past residents that have won awards for growing grass, taking their opinions and moving forward possibly with their input would be important, I think.
Okay. Director Beamish.
I guess you probably answered my question, because last year, Grant, I recall you left a message on my phone. I left a message on your phone. We never did connect about Brothers Park. So I assumed you connected with Wendy or something and dealt with her on that. But I would like to know from council's perspective in Gibsons what we need to do with Brothers Park. But if you're working with Tyler, that's great. And because he's now taken Wendy's position there and looking after our recreation and parks maintenance, so that if there's anything we can do, we are also going to be going into our budget process shortly, and I'd like to make sure that gets priority. It is a very busy area, and it needs to be a safe area, and if we could make it the best area, that would be good. Appreciate that.
Director Lee and then Director McMahon.
My kids are all out of soccer, but I was just curious, do you have some all-weather fields you can play? I know that I was heavily involved in soccer in Coquitlam, and we used our fields quite lightly in the winter and moved to all-weather fields so we could preserve the grass. Do you have that option, or?
Yes. So currently we do not have that option. It is a long-term goal of the Better Fields Committee to create all-weather field options for the community on the coast.
the reason I mentioned that is that it's just about if you use a grass field in really bad conditions, you can do long-term damage to it. And if you don't have another option, you end up doing it, and it's kind of self-defeating. But so all weather has got to be something that figures into the plan, especially for soccer because we play in the winter.
Yes, please.
So for clarity, all-weather fields generally are gravel fields, which we do actually have one gravel field on the Sunshine Coast beside Cedar Grove Elementary School, which is used from time to time for practices, nighttime activities, because it has lights. Nowadays, your kids have been out of soccer for a little while, but nowadays, all-weather fields in the city, where most communities, including Squamish and Merritt and other communities, their new all-weather field is a turf field. So most communities that we go to have turf fields, but they also still play on grass throughout the year. My team travels every second weekend, and we're traveling, whether it's to Coquitlam or Richmond or Powell River or wherever we're going, we're playing on grass fields even in the wintertime, even though they do sometimes have a turf field in those communities. So as much as I agree that grass is harder to maintain in the wintertime, most communities do it, but they have the base in a design aspect that can deal with our winters and our climate, much like golf courses and other things. But it would be a nice goal to have a turf field up here. But that's a slightly larger capital improvement, I think.
Director McMahon?
Well, I have not had time to go through all of your suggestions, but the regional cooperation aspect is, of course, makes so much sense because, we're all using all these fields regardless of boundaries, and between the local governments and the school district, it would make sense to have some sort of coherent direction going forward. But I think also for the SCRD in terms of recreation, we need to have a sort of coherent overall picture of what we're doing, because what we're getting is each group is coming to us separately or sometimes in opposition because they want, more pickleball, more ice time, more fix the fields, etc. And we can't handle this piecemeal. We actually do need to have a sensible strategy going forward to probably plan over a reasonable timeline, like the next 5 years, of what it is reasonable and what everybody can agree are the top priorities. It's not going to be the easiest thing in the world to achieve, I can see that, but at the same time, going at things just, whack-a-mole is just not the way to proceed.
I'll say that I've got Director Howard, but it's probably the first year in about 20 that I haven't been a soccer mom. And I've coached soccer, I've done little kids soccer, I've probably been on every field on the coast, including the school district field, so I'm well aware of the situation we've had. I know which fields are the best fields, which are the ones that my kids luckily played the majority of their time on, which are Lyons and Connor, which is convenient if you have a team coming down from Powell River, which is not very, very rarely happening unless you have a school tournament going on in Pender Harbor. So in order to get this level of any kind of level of play or any play, especially as children are moving through, moving up in ranks and hoping to increase their love of soccer by continuing to play at a higher level. And we have had a number of players on the coast play for Junior Whitecaps, and they got their start in our Youth Soccer Association. But I know even at the school district side, when we were trying to get as a parent trying to get teams to come over from other areas. It's really hard because the ferries is a deterrent. So you need to have a good field because otherwise they just won't bother at all. So I'm going to go to Director Howard then, please.
Chair, I'm hopeful that we, subject to further questions from the board, we can move shortly towards drafting some resolutions to advance these issues. Before doing so, I wanted to ask the delegation, the last bullet of your 8 bullet recommendations states revitalize the joint use function. I'm not familiar with that phrase. Can you just illuminate what you mean by the joint use function? And perhaps I'm the only one sitting up here that doesn't know what that refers to, but fill me in.
And this might actually be, maybe GM Hall might like to speak to explain the joint use function. We've already touched on it because I brought it up earlier when discussing the fields, but GM Hall.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Chair. Staff don't have any particular information to address the question that was asked, but if in the context of further exploration of fields there's a directive provided to staff, then certainly we can bring back more information about both past practice and current possibilities. Thank you.
Yeah, and so it's specifically the joint use function. Joint use is specifically between the SCRD and the school district to in using each other's facilities. So there's a big, large agreement about that, and I can direct that to you later. Does that answer okay? And Director Seegers? I saw Director Beamish's hand up. Yep.
So I guess that in terms of a plan going forward, my experience in redeveloping fields is you literally have to take fields out of service almost for a year in order to redevelop them. Now, Brothers Park is a multi-use field with baseball and soccer. So I'm trying to coordinate that with those groups and saying, look, we need to stand down for a year so we can bring this up to scratch. Shirley Macy and Cliff Gilker, I think, are single use. So they're just soccer fields, aren't they? I don't know that they play ball on them as well. As well, okay. So is it possible to come up with a plan that says, okay, we need to stand this field down for a year while we do the upgrade to it and then move through the system? And I don't know how to do Brothers Park other than working with a field that exists and trying to do some turf management on it as it exists now. Is that possible to do that effectively?
Yes, it absolutely is possible to do that. First, we need to form a committee. That would really be helpful. Secondly, in relation to Brothers Park, which we have submitted a letter to the town for you to read as well, the proposal that staff already will bring to your council is to fix the field, which it has actually still got potential to be fixed without shutting it down. So if that's approved, it should be fine. Ultimate Frisbee uses Cliff Gilker quite a bit, and that's another reason why we'd like to see Shirley Macy can be shut down for a year or 2 years. It only will affect soccer. It won't affect all the other sports and activities that are used. And once that's up to par, then we can start looking at other options for other fields, I think.
Thank you. I'll look forward to that coming forward from staff at Gibson. I haven't seen that yet, the proposal. Thanks.
Okay. Director Seegers?
Thank you. What's the status of the fields in Seashell? I mean, I'm just asking. Do they need a lot of work? Certain ones need work. Certain ones are okay. Where are we at?
What is the status? Hackett Park is a beautiful piece of grass for sure, and certainly baseball is going to enjoy it this coming spring and summer. And the little kids soccer can use it on a week-to-week basis. It was the best field in the community being the entire Sunshine Coast, of course. It drained perfectly. It bounced back from drought perfectly. But baseball's kind of taken it over, so we don't have a full-size soccer field there anymore, nor a full-size ultimate frisbee pitch, which is fine. Kinnickinnick is potentially the worst field on the Sunshine Coast. So that's why that's a bigger can of worms. So we're starting with the smaller cans right now.
I know kids that have broken bones.
We need to know that, though.
Yeah.
Because we're going into budget as well. So we know where we can direct staff to.
With past staff, we've had multiple conversations. The new staff just started, so we have to bring everybody up to speed. But I do believe that it's on staff's radar.
Okay, Director McMahon.
I'm not quite sure what the next steps here are. For instance, when you're talking about a joint use committee for fields, that's great, but it's not clear to me who the committee should be led by. Ideally, should it be an SCRD committee? Should it be independent and of the government? I don't know. I feel that there's a whole lot about this I don't know. We can certainly ask for a staff report on the state of the fields that the SCRD manages and the history of how they have been managed, which I'm not up on. Some of you field users may be, but I'm not. And opportunities for collaboration jointly between all of the governments and the school district, because I think that's to our benefit. There's a lot of questions out there. For instance, if we're going to have stage 4 droughts, we don't want to plant a field and then not water it. That would be awkward, to put it mildly. So there's a lot of moving pieces here.
Director Howard.
Thank you. You've brought a lot forward, and I've been trying to sort out in my mind what we can deal with and what is difficult to deal with concretely at present. The first bullet relates to proposed revision to the strategic plan, and in my mind that speaks to agenda item 7. And we can, if we wish, engage with it under that agenda item. I asked for a draft resolution that I had prepared to be circulated. And I'll speak to that in a moment. And based on Director McMahon's last comments, I'm wondering if what we can do today with this delegation in this meeting, subject to further discussion under agenda item 7, is to come up with a recommendation or a direction to staff to come back with a proposal for what a joint use committee or an intergovernmental committee, whatever we want to call it, would look like, who would be on it, how it would liaise with this group, rather than give the direction for that committee to be established at this point in time. So, pardon me, I am formulating my thoughts as I speak, but I would like to table as a motion the language which I have provided.
Just one moment, because I provided that on paper. I'm just going to ask for a motion to receive the document that I circulated before the meeting. It's the one that's tabled board meeting October 10th, 2019, agenda item 3, fields delegation. So can I have a motion to receive that, please? So moved, seconded. All those in favor? Okay. All right. And Mr. Howard, would you like to read that out?
Thank you, Chair. If I may,
so it's not on the floor. It's just receiving it because it was passed out before the meeting.
For my edification, may I preface reading it out with a few comments as to why the heck I prepared it? Thank you. In a nutshell, Shirley Macy was intended to be the crown jewel of playing fields in the SCRD field inventory. It was not engineered properly, it was not built properly, and it's therefore never achieved that status. It requires significant investment and intervention to get it up to its intended level of use and maintenance and quality. And I think it is important that we take a concrete step towards assessing the options for doing so, and that we not defer that. There has been too much deferral, I think, of this issue. So that's the thinking in my head that went into this proposed motion, which I'll now read out. The motion is that staff bring back a report with updated cost estimates for options 2, 3, and 4, identified in the May 25th, 2007 report from Bidding and Associates entitled Drainage at Shirley Macy Fields, comma, a recommendation from staff as to the preferred option for improving drainage on the Shirley Macy Fields, comma, and an overview of the scope and timing of the work required to implement the recommended option.
Do I have a seconder? Seconded?
If directors are wondering why there is no reference to an option one in that report is do nothing. That's why it's not mentioned. And the proposed language for an overview of scope and timing is to directly address Director Beamish's point, which is typically you need to close a field for a period of time, and that needs to be thought through and sequenced. So this resolution was framed with the intention of trying to anticipate those things and create a basis for us to make an informed decision about them going forward.
Discussion on the motion on the floor. Director Seegers.
Thank you. I have some concerns about the recommendation and the steps that we're requesting that staff take. One is this report is 12 years old. Do we know that it hasn't degraded so much that this is even maybe not even worth doing anymore, and it might be better to actually just build a new field, cheaper, more cost-effective, etc. So I would, if we're going to look at this, we would have to look at, first of all, is this field worth fixing before we even look at cost estimates for these various options. And, to identify the preferred option for improving drainage, 12-year-old report is too old to actually do anything based on. And then overview and scope and timing of the work required to implement the recommended option. I think we're starting with a false premise here. If we're going to look at doing any kind of remediation to Shirley Macy, we need to go back and update that report first to identify whether or not it's even worth doing.
Okay. Grant, I'll let you speak to that.
I read the report differently. I think the report states that it's not worth repairing. It's worth rebuilding. And I think doing another report would just slow things down and cost more money. I think the report, when I read it, says, look, it's time to just rebuild the field. What is existing can be built upon. And that the report goes into, in layman's terms, says you need to raise it up 3 or 4 feet anyway, so just build your new field up above it.
I'm going to look over to staff to see if there's a comment on this as well.
Well, thank you, Chair. Staff would concur with the delegation's brief summary of the report. Anything other than a rebuild does not address the underlying issue, which is drainage. And since the time of that report and subsequent staff reports in 2014, 2016, staff have tried and have appreciated the input of the park staff from member municipalities, the feedback from user groups, have tried to tailor the management practices that are applied by parks to get the most out of the resource that we can. But clearly there are limits that when you're dealing with standing water, there are limits you can't exceed in terms of your management practices, no matter how much extra aeration or how careful you are with your seed prescription. You're just not going to overcome those things. Thanks.
Any further comments from the board to the motion on okay. Director Seegers.
So option 2 says remediate existing sand and remove filter fabric. Is that basically rebuilding the field, or is that just doing some remediation to what exists there?
GM Hall.
Thank you for the question. Without having the full report in front of me, I I believe a conclusion was that, a conclusion elsewhere in the report was that attempting to sift or otherwise repair the sand that's used might have some effect, but as the costs were nearly as high as adding a new sand base, the return on investment wasn't likely to be as high.
Director Howard?
Thank you. I simply wanted to, in response to Director Seeger's question and comment, I similarly read the Binney report options 3 and 4 are in essence rebuilding the field. So my thinking in seeking updated cost estimates was we were capturing updated cost estimates for a range of work up to and including a full rebuild.
So we have a motion on the floor. Is there any other comments or questions on the motion? Director McMahon?
I'm sitting on the fence here, not because this isn't a good thing to do, but again, piecemeal. We really, in my view, need a regional field strategy. So if we can figure out a piece here to start moving a regional field strategy forward, if there's some interim work we can do within this budget cycle, fine. But I don't want to start, making big decisions to do a big capital investment in one field without looking at the bigger picture.
I'm going to look around to the board to see Director Beamish.
I guess in response to that, I see that this has been an outstanding issue and a recommendation for many years. So it's one that you have to start somewhere, and we can continue to study the picture, but we need to actually take some of the information that was developed 2007, 2014, move it forward and say we need to go and do the rest. I'm actually in favor, after this resolution is dealt with, of looking at the second bullet, and that's support in the governmental ad hoc committees as well, sort of thing. But I think you have to actually pick a number, go forward, and while we're doing that, do other things. It's my sense anyway.
And to clarify, this is asking staff to do a report on updated cost estimates. So this isn't actually committing us to any work. However, it's moving forward on one piece of an outstanding project that has not been anything done with for a long time. So, Director Hiltz?
So are we moving towards a budget recommendation after the report comes? That's kind of, is that what we're looking at going with this?
Director Seegers?
I guess that would depend on the timing by when we would request this information back.
Mm-hmm.
If we're looking at having it back in time to potentially put forward a budget proposal, then we would want that back, by end of year or sooner?
Look over to staff.
My CFO colleague may add more detail, but staff are working to have a preliminary budget package presented of kind of first cut information at the October 24th Corporate and Administrative Services meeting, and then round one budget is early in December.
Okay. Okay, so Director Seegers, back to you, and then over to Dr.
So follow up. So if we were looking to have something with regards to Shirley Macy in the budget for this coming year, I mean, I'm not saying we are, but if we were, when would we need to have information back from staff in order to be able to consider it?
Thank you for the question. The simple answer, but not helpful answer, is prior to the adoption of the budget, early in 2020. Staff can work to prepare information in accordance with the financial plan timeline that was approved at the last Corporate and Administrative Services meeting. As somebody who would be involved in writing that report, I think staff would strive to have some information at the initial budget meeting on October 24th, and focusing on quality, it may take until round one budget to have a complete picture in order for the committee to make a decision.
Okay. Yes, Mr. Robbins.
Excuse my ignorance if I don't know how this process takes place, but the Better Fields Committee has time and potentially some fundraising capacity. So if there's anything that the Better Fields Committee could do to assist with this process, we'd be happy to dedicate the resources to help out if that would make any difference.
Thank you for that offer. You might be, no. Director Beamish, I had you next.
Yeah, and just quickly, Binny's still in business, and they might be able to just update the report. It's not going to, they might need to walk the field again one more time, see if it's further degraded for whatever reason. The other second thing is, should the resolution include a option of, or request also that staff look at grant options, grant opportunities and things like this for that funding, because there are grants out there for recreation and for this sort of thing. They might be able to find some grants that would tie into our budget process, and I wonder if that could be looked at the same time.
I don't know if that, I don't think that needs to be explicit in the motion, does it? No, I don't think so. Okay, so yes, Director Seegers.
And this is for staff. Do you want us to put a timing in this motion, or are you okay with just bringing it forward?
The timing needs are understood. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, has everybody exhausted their questions on this matter? Seeing no more questions, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor of the motion? There you go. Okay, that carries. So Mr. Howard's motion has passed. We also still have the recommendations from the delegation. We have 8 recommendations on page 22E. What I am going to suggest is that we will be talking about the strategic plan later in this agenda under item number 7. So what I would like to ask is maybe items 2 through 8 on the recommendations or the suggestions from the delegation be referred to staff to come back as a report on potential options for implementation. Okay? Okay, you'll move that. And may I ask,
I'll move that.
Okay, and may I have a seconder? Seconder? Any comments or questions on those? Any discussion? Director Howard?
I think it would be beneficial for this delegation and the rest of us to know the timing on when we can expect to receive that back. I don't mean to put unnecessary pressure on staff, but in particular, I share Director Beamish's view that initiating that interjurisdictional, intergovernmental discussion is important and should proceed. So would it be helpful to set an aspirational timeline in that direction to staff?
I'm going to put that question to staff and ask for a potential reply date. I understanding that some of these items are would be quite more easy to answer rather than others. GM Hall?
Thank you for the question, Chair. Staff, I am struggling a little bit to come up with a definitive answer on timing, noting that some of these actions require agreement from multiple parties. I think in principle, staff can address all of these in a report back that includes information about field repair or reconstruction costs, and that we can provide that no later than round 1 budget.
Would you require that within the motion, or are you okay with just understanding?
Staff sense some directors' interest in having a timeline to keep the process on track, and so if a motion is provided around timing, that's welcomed.
Okay, so I'm going to ask for an amendment for round one.
Yes, please.
Okay, and seconded? Seconded. Any further discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, I'll call the question on the amendment. All those in favor of the amendment? Opposed? Motion carries. Did you get that, Jennifer? Great. Okay, Bill, can you turn off your microphone, please?
Oh, sure.
Thank you. I'm getting some feedback. I'm so not used to feedback. Okay, so we now have an amended motion for items 2 through 8 of the suggestions from the board delegation to come back for round one budget. Are there any further comments or discussion on this matter, on this motion? Seeing that, I'm going to call the question. Oh, sorry, Director Beamish.
I'm sorry, I'm just going to come back in there. 2, 7, and 8 really talk about working together.
Mm-hmm.
And the other ones are more in terms of budget and getting things done on specific parks. And I really would like to give some priority to the idea of developing that regional collaboration on this and working together on this with outside group as a priority, because it could get lost in our budget process. That, hey, we come up with some great numbers and go in there, but we really do want to actually have something going. I'm certainly prepared to talk to Gibson's and Gibson staff and CAO and see if they can't be part of that. We are working together in so many other levels. This is one level we need to bring to that table, bring to that process.
Okay, I'm sensing the delegation.
I'd just like to second that motion.
You can't, but thank you. Okay, so Director Seegers.
Thank you. I'm wondering if this is, I mean, I'm in support of the motion that's on the floor right now, moving this forward. But knowing how we work at the table here, I'm thinking we would probably all task our CAOs with just making this happen. Yeah. And then that can go forward. Staff will look at how that information gets fed back into the boards and the councils, but I think we can just make that happen outside of the process here.
Yeah. Yes, I'm going to go to the delegation. You have a question?
So, as some of you might know, I've been doing this for 5 or 6 years now. I've talked with all of staff, even current staff, with exception possibly to Mr. Hall, I can't recall, but I would say that we are happy to work with Mr. Hall to make sure that all the doors are open through the different staff parties in all the different districts, including the school district, who recently said they would like to work on not just joint use, but joint maintenance moving forward.
Sorry.
There's quite a bit of money, I believe, that can be saved with joint maintenance of fields. Sharing of equipment and the use that will disperse the costs amongst the different regions and governments.
Okay, Director Seegers.
I think what we found when CAO Brown came here, the CAOs are meeting weekly, bi-weekly now, and so we're finding it very effective from the boards and councils and staff to direct them to take on these initiatives, which filters down to their staff and comes back, because they're actually our conduit to make things happen. So there have been a number of initiatives that have gone forward over the last number of months through that avenue. So I think we all are seeing that that's probably the quickest way to get something moving forward. Mr. Hall will definitely be involved, and we will be involved as well, but it brings it down from a corporate perspective rather than a department perspective. So it makes it corporate-wide.
Yes, certainly.
So, excuse my ignorance again, but does that include School District 46 then, as well as the Sechelt Indigenous Band?
And I'll go over to CAO Brown.
The biweekly meetings includes the Indian Government District as well as the 2 municipalities. So we do meet every 2 weeks. Our next meeting will be next Wednesday. This will be on the agenda. The other point about the school district, I have met with the Secretary Treasurer and the Superintendent and discussed this very issue, along with a number of other issues such as busing, et cetera, and joint use agreements. So it's definitely at the forefront, given the board's strategic plan as well on collaboration and cooperation, and that's certainly at the forefront of our discussions.
Okay. Level of comfort?
Golden. Thank you.
Okay, Director McMahon, I had you on the list, and then I'm going to call the question unless there's somebody else pressing.
I'm just going to say, if there are any models out there of regional collaboration on fields that we could look at, that would be helpful. We don't need to reinvent the wheel here, so if you can bring that forward, that'd be great.
Okay, so I'm going to call the question on the motion to refer to numbers 2 through 8 to staff to come back for round 1 budget. Is everybody clear on what you're voting on? Okay, Jennifer, and you got that? Perfect. I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Motion carries. Gentlemen, do you have anything else you'd like to say?
Just on behalf of the Better Fields Committee, thank you very much for your consideration and support for our community.
Yes, and I will say thank you very much for your work on this, and we were very indulgent with our time today. We usually like 10 to 15 minutes for a presentation, but we got a lot accomplished there, I think. So thank you so much, and thank you very much for being here today. All right, so we will move on through our agenda. I was remiss at the beginning of the meeting for not introducing our recording secretary today, Jennifer Hill, who is a new addition to the Sunshine Coast. So give her a Sunshine Coast welcome, please. Okay, thank you. And next up on our agenda, as our gallery empties, is our reports. I'm going to ask for a motion to receive all the reports now, please. So moved. Seconded. All those in favor? Motion carries. First up, number 4, Annex C, Planning and Community Development Committee recommendations, numbers 1 through 5. They're all listed there from September 12th, 2019. We did have a few there that were previously adopted. Before we adopt these as a block, do the directors want to bring out, yes, Corporate Officer, please.
Thank you, Chair. Staff would request that we pull recommendation number 3.
Okay, pull out recommendation number 3 from PCDC.
Yes.
Okay. Directors, do you want to pull out any other of those recommendations before we move the rest of them as a block? So to be clear, we are pulling out number 3. And then we have recommendations that were previously adopted. So may I have a motion to adopt the other recommendations? So moved and seconded. All those in favor? Motion carries. Okay, and over to staff for recommendation number 3, please.
Thank you, Chair. We'd like to propose an amendment to postpone the public hearing at the request of the applicant. So in the third and that clause, we would like to propose an amendment and that a public hearing to consider amendment bylaws numbers 641.12 and 310.185 be postponed to a later date to be confirmed.
Thank you. Okay, so is everyone clear on the motion on the floor? Okay, it's not on the floor yet. The motion being proposed by staff. May I have a motion to propose that recommendation?
What she said.
Okay. Seconded. Jennifer, did you get that? Okay. Is there any questions on that recommendation? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. Okay.
That was for the amendment, or was that for the motion?
That was, okay, I'm going to go to a corporate officer. That takes care of the entire recommendation number 3 then?
Yes, unless you would like to strike the appointment of the chair and the alternate chair for the committee. We can leave them on there, but we don't have a date yet to commit them to.
Okay. My suggestion would be just leave everything as is until we have a date for sure. Okay? All right. Okay, seeing no other questions, we're going to move down to number 5 on our agenda, which is Annex D of your package, Infrastructure Services Committee recommendations numbers 1 through 13 of September 19th, 2019. Directors, would you like to pull out any of these recommendations before we move them as a block? Or staff, I should look to as well. No? No, nobody's making eye contact anymore. Okay, seeing none, may I have a motion to adopt those recommendations? So moved. Seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Motion carries. Item number 6 on our agenda is the Corporate and Administrative Services Committee recommendations number 1 through 14 of September 19th, 2019, Annex E of your packages, pages 38 to 42. Does anybody want to pull out any of these recommendations to discuss separately before we vote on them as a block? Staff? Seeing no burning jumping up and down. Okay, so I'm going to ask for a recommendation to adopt, or pardon me, I'm going to ask that we adopt these recommendations. So moved. Seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Motion carries. Okay, 6A on our agenda is the Planning and Community Development Committee recommendations numbers 2, 4, 9, 11, 12, and 13 of earlier today, pages 42A and B of your package. Directors, do you want to speak about any of those separately? Director Beamish.
I'd like to remove number 4 from the block because I will recuse myself again on that one.
Okay, so we will remove number 4 from the block. Okay, Director McMahon?
I just had a couple things to say about number 2.
Number 2. Okay, we'll remove number 2 from the block. Okay, so we have numbers 9, 11, 12, and 13. May I have a motion to adopt those recommendations? So moved. Seconded. All those in, any further discussion first? Seeing none. All those in favor? Motion carries. Okay, we'll start with number 2. Director McMahon.
Yeah, I'm sorry I didn't raise it this morning, but when we're getting topics like this, we do need to figure out what role Scredo will play in these, because affordable housing is an economic issue on the Sunshine Coast. And some of this is fine to come to the SCRD, but we do have a lot of things that come to us, and sometimes they are more appropriately directed towards Scredo. So that's something that we're going to have to figure out as we move forward.
Director Seegers.
Thank you. I do recall that she did mention that they were talking with Scredo around this.
Okay, any further discussion on number 2? Seeing none, I'm going to ask for a motion to adopt this recommendation. So moved. Seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Motion carries. Okay, and Director Beamish is recusing himself from number 4.
Yes, because this is a subject of a public hearing with the Town of Gibsons, and I'll recuse myself for that.
Okay, great. Okay, plug your ears because I'm going to start talking before you're leaving the room, or as you're leaving the room. Oh, Tom, can you turn off his mic, please? No. Thank you, Director Hiltz. Okay, so recommendation number 4, may I have a motion to adopt? So moved. Seconded. Any further discussion on this? We had quite a, I almost said fulsome. We had quite a lengthy, informative, comprehensive conversation earlier today on this. I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Motion carries. Okay, so we could let Bill back in, or not. Just turn your microphone on for that. Okay. Okay. So everybody's in agreement that Director Beamish's stipend gets sent to Guatemala? Great. That's excellent. Okay. Next up on our list is Annex F, the Chief Administrative Officer's 2019-2023 Amended Draft Strategic Plan. CAO Brown.
Thank you, Chair Pratt. I did have a PowerPoint presentation. Unfortunately, we're having some technical difficulties here, but it's basically the same as the printed copies on pages 45 to 61 in the agenda package. So I'll read from that. The memorandum that outlines the process for the strategic plan is on page 43. As the board recalls, back in September 12th, the draft strategic plan that was developed by the consultant was presented to the board, and the resolution that was adopted at that meeting was that the strategic plan be forwarded to the municipal partners, advisory planning commissions, agriculture advisory committee, and the Natural Resource Advisory Committee for comments. That has since been done, and the comments are included in the report. The second recommendation was that staff be authorized to use the draft 2019 to 23 strategic plan as presented to provide direction for the purpose of developing preliminary budget proposals. And indeed, that has been embraced by the CFO and all of the senior managers, as well as the other managers in developing our budget proposals. And then the final recommendation was to bring it back to this very meeting. In addition to that, I also presented this to all of the staff that were in attendance here in this room for the Field Road office, as well as Mason Road. The PowerPoint was working at that meeting. And we had some very good comments and appreciation for the fact that the staff were informed of the board's priorities. The plan itself provides for the 5 strategic focus areas, and I'm just going to, in an interest of time, jump to page 61. So this was not included in the original strategic plan that was presented on September 12th. It's a document that I've put together with Cecilia, our communications officer, and it basically encapsulates the plan sort of in a one-pager at a high level that provides for something that can be circulated to the staff, to the general public, the committees, etc., which provides the high-level focus areas of engagement and communications, infrastructure management, regional collaboration and partnership, climate change and resilience, and advocacy. And I stress that the board, even though the number 1 through 5, that was not necessarily the priorities of the board. So with that, I welcome any questions, even though it's your plan.
Okay. All right. I'm going to look to my directors and see if you have any comments or questions or discussion items. Director McMahon.
I do think it would be nice, perhaps the individual directors could take on talking to our APCs to address some of the concerns that they raised. A lot of the actions that they were keen on, while valuable actions, are getting into too much of a level of detail, I think, for our strategic plan. You can't plan individual actions this far ahead. So I have a little bit of feedback, and maybe we could each, as a director, take the feedback. My only concern is a motion that I was planning to bring forward as a part of the climate change emergency, which is that I really think that we should specifically state that our goal is to reduce our GHG emissions to net zero by 2030. That's the global goal that has been set, and we need to step up to the plate. I realize it's difficult, but first off, as residents of this planet, it's our responsibility. Secondly, we are citizens of one of the most prosperous countries in the world, and we've done more than our fair share in contributing to greenhouse gas emissions. And thirdly, if we can't do this in a country this prosperous, then I don't know what chance there is for anybody else to do it. So, I think we need to set bold targets and do our best to meet them.
Looking to the other directors for any further comments. Director Lee.
I pretty well echo what Donna just said. Like, when I look through the strategic plan, I see answers to the APC's questions. I seem to be reading something into it that they can't see when they read it. So I think we need to somehow present to them and explain our view of the world. And it's always good to have someone like the CAO with you, because people see not only the director's commitment, but they see the SCRD staff commitment in their eyes when the CAO is there. I know it's a little bit time consuming, but I think it would be good use of time to get to do that for each of our APCs.
CAO Brown?
Yes, thank you for the opportunity to respond. I very much support that. There's been a lot of work done by our volunteers, and these are valuable members of our community that provide this input. It's not discounted whatsoever when we don't change the plan, if that's what happens. But I think it needs to be explained, as Director McMahon and Director Lee had just stated, that there's a number of supporting documents that will cover off a lot of their concerns and comments. And I think once we go through the budget cycle, if there's any particular tactics and initiatives that we have missed that the board feels should be done, you can review what the staff has presented in their work plans in the coming weeks and months, and we can certainly cross-check with their input to see if we've addressed their concerns.
Okay. Director Beamish?
We are going through a similar exercise with our strategic plan right now as well. We had a dialogue on it this September the 30th. Two of the areas that I think we need to be in close sync with are the focus area 3, which is regional collaboration and partnership, as well as the focus area 4, which are climate change and resilience. They can't be done in isolation of each other, in terms of we couldn't come up with a different type of regional collaboration and partnership model that is different from the regional districts and not be in any sense that we could work in opposing ways. And climate change doesn't recognize boundaries. So that if we're working on climate change and we're working on a net zero target, for example, we all have to have a net zero target. Otherwise, we're working against each other. And that's probably what I'm going to take back to my council in terms of those two issues, that we need to be somewhat synchronized on those, that we need to work together at a regional level. Nothing in this plan should be different than what's in our plan in that area, regional development. And again, with climate change, we need to have very similar goals in climate change areas so that they become very similar documents, and people can see that they're similar. I mean, if we're working on climate change, we should be working on that together at a regional level, not a local level, because there are no boundaries when it comes to climate change.
Okay. Going to, I went through director, GM, CAO. Please.
Not to belabor the matter, but just to follow up on Director Beamish's comments, and I can certainly concur with that. And this document was presented to my fellow CAOs, and we did review it together. So they're very much have the knowledge of what this document contains. So.
Director Howard?
Thank you. I share the view that the groups that provided input to this plan, we should close that circle by returning to them to explain how their input was taken into account and where it's addressed. Otherwise, the input appears to have been merely going through the motions. For myself, I want to be able to do so with the Better Fields Committee, who I liaise with. And I just want to state how I intend to address their interest in seeing field maintenance in the strategic plan, and ask staff whether the manner in which I intend to address it is correct. My intention is to speak to them and point to Infrastructure Management 2.2, the first tactic, and to state that it is the understanding of our board and our staff that our recreational fields form part of the assets which are to be managed in compliance with the tactic identified at 2.2. Would that be a reasonable and accurate way to get back to them on that? I think I got my answer from my left.
It is covered by our asset management plan, but if you want further information, I could have one of the other members of the management team respond.
Briefly, staff would see that there are alignments between the items just discussed with the Better Fields Committee delegation and water conservation programs under 2.1. When we think about having adequate irrigation at all times of year for fields, important to their maintenance. 2.2, as described by the director. 3.3, government collaboration, intergovernmental collaboration. And also 4.1, ensuring that any asset that we're rebuilding or developing now is suited for the climate that's coming and able to deal with whatever climate extremes might be coming.
I'm looking to the directors for any further questions or comments. Director McMahon?
Should we set a zero emissions target in our strategic plan, or should we do it as a separate process? That's, I guess, my question.
Director Howard?
Fully supportive of the objective, confused as to the meaning of net zero. And I would not be in favor of adopting as a goal something that I can't explain and don't understand. So to the extent there needs to be a clear articulation of what the target is we are shooting for and that we define, I would support having that discussion first before adopting it.
I'll look to staff if they'd like to speak to that. Would staff like to speak to that, or should I go to another? Okay, please. GM Hall.
Thank you, Chair. To add to the committee's discussion, staff's read of the second tactic under 4.3 is that by 2021, the board would like to have a conversation about what it will take to achieve carbon neutrality. And at that time, and based on an emissions inventory, clear and concise and legible answers to what carbon neutrality means, both technically and practically for the region, can be provided. And perhaps that would certainly be a venue to consider a target date for achievement of a particular goal. Thank you.
Thank you. Does that, okay, Director Seegers?
Under 4.1, the first bullet as well, I think, does some of that preliminary work to identify how we get there.
Okay. So I'm going to look to Director McMahon. Does that, and Director Howard, does that put forward your concerns?
I'm okay with that.
You're okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Director Beamish?
Are we being bold?
I don't know. Do we go to the public or the media to ask that question? Director Hiltz and then Director Lee.
I think there's bold and measured, I think, is our statement. So I think there's a, not the reckless boldness, but, a measured boldness.
Director Lee?
I don't know about bold, but I would say we're certainly being ambitious here. It looks like a lot of work.
Director Seegers?
I'd like to move the recommendations on page 43, that we adopt the 2019-2023 strategic plan as presented, and thank staff for all the work they put into that.
Yes. Okay, so moved and seconded? No, you had a question again? Okay, so there's a motion, and I saw Director McMahon's go out as a seconder. I'm going to go to Director Lee.
I personally think the plan is ready for adoption. I was just wondering if we would do that before we close the circle with our APCs. I really value our APCs, and I'd like to get back to them and answer their concerns. And I believe because we tentatively adopted it and we're going forward with the budget based on these items, that we could wait a month before we formally adopt it. And that would give a chance for feedback for our committees.
I'm Director McMahon.
With respect, we've been in office nearly a year. I think we need to get our strategic plan out the door. And it may take us more than a month to get back to all the APCs. So I think we should move it now. And but yeah, I understand your concern, but I think that this is the point where we need to move.
Okay. Director Beamish?
I may not have wording, but I'm wondering if there needs to be another and that being that we acknowledge the contributions of the APCs towards the plan, and we respond to them, their concerns, their issues raised, and however that could be worded so that that's not lost, but they are recognized in the resolutions that we make, because they did a lot of work in consideration of it.
I think we could probably word that the rural directors report back to their APCs with a report on the strategic plan. If that would work. Director Lee, does that feel your concern?
I'm not sure. I think we should have been to them earlier so that we had it done. And to me, they are the grassroots of our community. And I think we need to show them the respect that they deserve for putting their time in, and to approve something when they're uncomfortable and we haven't answered. I don't believe that's appropriate. So that's my take on it. I will go with the majority, of course.
I have Director Seekers, then Director Howard.
Thank you. So you've had conversation with your APC. Are you comfortable that their concerns have been addressed and are represented in this strategic plan?
No, I was at the UBCM and missed the meeting. And I've attempted to connect with them afterwards. And I don't really have a firm grasp on all of their concerns. The ones that they did clearly express, yes, I believe they're in there. But I really haven't had a chance to go through and talk to them individually and make sure what their concerns are. I guess what Bill's suggesting is, Director Beamish, is that we put an and that so that we indicate that we're willing to change if something important comes up. But I think that is a strategic plan anyways when it's in. We do revisit it regular.
I think Director Beamish's intent of his motion was for the directors to report back to the APCs, to acknowledge their feedback that they've put in, to make sure that it's part of our feedback loops. I have, after Director Seegers, I had Director Howard and then Director McMahon.
Thank you. Speaking for Area D, I think we are quite comfortable with reporting back to the APC, even if this board now approves the strategic plan. I don't see any difficulties with that at our end. And my best guess would be that staff could use an approved strategic plan because you're going into budget preparation. And it is a meta-level document that should be guiding that preparation. So balancing everything together, I would propose that we approve this and give staff that direction and move forward with returning to our APCs and beginning to prepare budgets in accordance with the strat plan.
Over to the CAO.
I think if I could just provide some reassurance to Director Lee, just trying to interpret the board's intention here. The strategic plan was referred to the APCs. We do have their input. It was summarized in the previous committee meetings minutes. I summarize them at a high level in my accompanying report. The field users group that was just here previously had the input, or at least feedback, of how the detail of their initiatives, for example, fit into the strategic plan. The advisory planning commissions have not had that information. So what I understand from the board's directive would be that this feedback loop be completed to the advisory planning commissions that did not have that information on how their detailed tactics will actually be included in the plan, because many of them are. And I think they just need that information to complete that loop, so that the plan itself can be adopted at the high level and have the feedback that their specific tactics and strategies and initiatives and comments, how they were considered and how they will be considered going forward.
And just to note too that 4 of the APCs happened during UBCM, so they didn't even have a director present to even speak to the plan. It was only Area D that actually had their rural director there, so they didn't even have that. My APC didn't have the option of even communicating with me. So I have Director McMahon on the list.
At some point, I think we should look at perhaps making a recommendation to the next strategic planning process that will take place in 3 or 4 years. But, consulting the APCs seems to have been an afterthought, and perhaps it shouldn't have been an afterthought. Perhaps that should have been part of the process right up front. So if we can somehow record that as a thought to consider the next time around.
Well, a lot of extenuating circumstances this past year. So, Director Hiltz.
Yeah, comment towards Director McMahon. I turn towards strategy 1.1 to develop that public outreach. So I think it's in the plan to kind of to revisit how the plan was actually built. So yeah, for me, I agree it should have been earlier, but hindsight. Yeah, so it's going to be foresight now, right? So.
Okay, so we do have a motion on the floor. We have a suggested amendment, but I haven't heard that seconded, about bringing it back to the APCs. Seconded, and then that closes that loop. So we have an amendment for the directors to bring it back, or I guess it was as the board. Jennifer, can you read that?
And that the rural directors.
Oh, could you use this, please?
And that the rural directors report back to their APCs with a report on the strategic plan.
Okay. So that's the amendment that's on the floor right now. Are there any further comments on the amendment? Seeing none, I'm going to call the question on the amendment. All those in favor? Thank you. That passes. So we now have an amended motion, including that amendment. Are there any further discussion? Yes, Director Lee.
I was just wondering how the municipalities did talking to their councils. Do you feel that your councils had sufficient input into the strat plan?
We got tons during the election, thank you. And it's reflected in our strategic plan.
Okay. And Director Beamish, I know you're still in your strategic planning process.
We're going through ours, and it'll be back on discussion this coming week, but we are going through the process, and they did receive copies of this one. Yeah.
Okay, that answers your question. Okay, we do have an amended motion on the floor. Is there any further discussion on this? Seeing none, I'm going to call the question on the amended motion. All those in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. Now, I'm going to bring it up. I know we talked a lot about fields earlier today, but there is, do we need to deal with an action or tactic, or if the board wants to bring forward an action or a tactic regarding fields, or does staff have enough information in that regard so far? I'm going to look to Mr. Hall.
Thank you, Chair. Between the at least 4 tactics that staff mentioned as reflecting the conversation with the delegation and the directive from earlier in the meeting. Staff have lots to go on. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make sure we had closed that loop. So wonderful. So we've got a lot going on there. Great. Okay. Seeing no more discussion on the strategic plan, we're going to move on, kind of flip the page over to page number 2. Under motions, we have a resignation from our Area E Advisory Planning Commission. So I'm gonna look to our director from Area E to make that motion that the resignation of Sandra Cunningham from the Area E Advisory Planning Commission be received.
I move that.
Okay, and seconded. All those in favor? Motion carries. And we have bylaws. So the first is number 9 on your agenda package. Thank you so much to staff for all of the work on the strategic plan. I'm sorry I was remiss in not saying that earlier. And I know it's been a long process. We are almost at our 1-year anniversary, and so to finally have that adopted is great. And thank you, and we're looking forward to moving forward together. So thank you. Annex G of our package, Roberts Creek Official Community Plan Amendment Bylaw number 641.10, 2018. We're looking for a third reading and adoption at this meeting. This is for electoral area directors only. You have 1 vote each. So may I have a motion for Roberts Creek Official Community Plan Amendment Bylaw number 641.10, 2018 for third reading, please? So moved, seconded. All those in favor? Motion carries. And may I have a motion for adoption for the Roberts Creek Official Community Plan Amendment Bylaw number 641.10, 2018. Move adoption. So moved. Seconded. All those in favor? Motion carries. Number 10 on the agenda package, Annex H, is the Sunshine Coast Regional District Zoning Amendment Bylaw number 310.179, 2018. We're looking for third reading and adoption. Electoral area directors only for voting, 1 vote each. So may I have a motion for third reading of Sunshine Coast Regional District Zoning Amendment number 310.179, 2018. Move third reading. So moved. Seconded. All those in favor? Motion carries. And may I have a motion for adoption of Sunshine Coast Regional District Zoning Amendment number 310.179, 2018. So move adoption. Seconded. Seconded. All those in favor? Motion carries. Terrific. Okay. So, wow. So we're at our director's reports portion of the afternoon. After director's reports. After director's reports. Sorry, Bill. All right. Sorry, Director Beamish. Okay. But with that, seeing as you spoke up, would you like to start with your director's reports, please?
Sure.
Okay.
Post UBCM, we did have a dialogue on September 30th, as I mentioned, on our strategic plan. It was very interesting. We had about 40 people come out, and along with members of council and staff. And it really was interesting because we had new people out, people I hadn't seen before, people that hadn't been participating before. One of whom expressed that, they just recently, long-time resident, just recently bought a house and felt that it was time that they got involved. And so that younger people looking at differences, different ideas, so that we're looking forward to going forward with that. In fact, my article for the local will actually focus on that a bit, those differences, and how we want to encourage everybody in the community to get involved. So it was very good. We've generated a report on that, and that is should be now on our website from that dialogue. And we'll be looking to having one more between now and Christmas. And then I guess we've done other things that we've all done, but I went to the GPAG Gibson Public Art Gallery reception last weekend, and it was very nice. And they were looking for the sponsors for different shows coming up this year. And I understand they were very successful in having all of the 12 shows sponsored that evening, and that was very good. and they certainly do provide a good service to our community and artwork. So, yeah, I don't think I'll report on anything else. I think that's it. Thank you.
Terrific. Thank you, Director Beamish. We're going to go across over to Director Lee. What's been going on in Area A?
I must say I'm busier than I anticipated with things that I call individual issues, but in fact they affect everybody, but they take up way more of my time than I thought. I did report a little bit on it at our recent town hall meeting. I didn't do a real good job because I was trying to get at the fact that regional directors are really stretched. We're lone rangers in a lot of ways, and it sure is not a part-time job. You know, it's definitely not. I should have closed the loop. I'll work on it some more. Got lots of sympathy, but that isn't what I was looking for. I was looking for a possible solution. There's lots of concern around lack of consultation prior to the logging. I keep getting emails. I keep getting calls. We really do need to start getting involved where the Crown land meets the private land is what I call it. We need to find a resolution. So I guess I'll continue to get the calls, but we'll continue to work on a solution. The SCRD role in coordinating infrastructure services in support of economic development keeps coming up. Things like, did we make our water supply big enough for the future? And if not, why didn't we? You know, that kind of thing. We want the water line extended so that people can subdivide their 1 and 2 lots. What role will the SCRD play in getting that part done? Those questions continue to be answered, continue to be asked. We attempt to answer them, one of which, thanks to our GM and our CAO, we dealt with the Wilderness Lodge one, but they're not going to stop. We need to have some sort of strategy for those things. Something that kind of surprised me was the need to inform the public on zoning, rezoning, and variance procedures, and stress their role in it and when they need to get involved. I'm seeing it, the recent rezoning for pods. No one quite knew when and how to approach us and get their input. And I think we're also seeing it right now in the short-term rentals. We're at the end of the process, but the public's making it clear that they didn't know we were. I don't know what we do with that. We can't talk about it. But somehow we need to get the message out on what the process is and make sure that the people really understand the conversation and where it's happening and how far along we are. We need work to do on that, communications. And I just thought to bring you guys current on something called Lot 4700. Got my very own lot, just like 1313, kind of. It's a chunk of property between Ruby Lake and Saginaw Lake that's been put aside for potential park by the provincial government. It was done in 1948. It's been there a long time. But someone wants to put a road through the middle of it to get to property on the other side, and because it stretches from lake to lake, it blocks their access, their potential of getting a road. So the questions start coming, do we make it a park? Do we support a road through a future park? Is it right to block private property from having a road? Those are things that are up for discussion on Lot 4700. And I don't know the answer, but at least I put it in my newsletter to get the discussion started so that people can have their input. The their biggest concern surprised me, and that is that they think we might do it without telling them, which I keep saying, no, we wouldn't do that. But then they say, but you've done it a whole bunch of times before, which is my earlier comment. We need to inform them. And it's all about sharing our natural resources. People have houses on the lake, and they use the lake for boating. They don't want anybody else on their lake, you know. And I'm not very patient with that kind of thing because it's our natural resource. Everybody has a right to use it. But you get they like the ferries the way it is because they don't want more people. So this is our growth strategy. Where are we going to go so that everybody understands? And great discussion. Lack of access to our lakes is a good thing. They don't want new lake access because they like their lake the way it is. My answer is, do you have to have property on the ocean or property on the lakes or property next to the parks to use them? And the answer is, when you look at it that way, of course not. So, interesting discussion. Been having those. It's a little stressful, but I guess it's good that my people in the area feel that they'll talk to me about it, and they hope we can do something about it, which I like. So, anyways, I'm actually enjoying myself, by the way. I forgot to mention that. And I don't know if you guys heard or not, but at the town hall I told them what a good bunch of people you are and how I enjoy working with you and how you're all concerned for your communities. And I did mean it, so thank you.
I was just wondering because it sounded like Director Beamish's phone snickered when you said that. So I guess my one comment is, if we're Lone Rangers, where's my horse? I want a pony. Thank you very much, Director Lee. We'll go over to the District of Sechelt and Director Lamb. Yeah.
Okay. At UBCM, the District of Sechelt was given a grant that we'd applied for $10,000, and it's matching funds, and it's with regards to water conservation, and the District of Sechelt had already set aside the $10,000 to match that. So Water Resource Select Committee, we've formed that committee and we've had a couple of meetings. And the focus of the committee is for water conservation and reclaimed water. So we've got a grant for for the water conservation, and we'd applied for a grant for the reclaimed water. And we have obviously a spectacular facility in Sechelt to deal with reclaimed water or to give us reclaimed water that we can use. And the focus of our committee is not directly at Sechelt. If there is, if we come up with some interesting stuff, it's going to be shared with the regional district, and we've got a pretty cool board. District of Sechelt has an airport committee, and once again we've received monies to upgrade the airport with the intent to establish, hopefully we can get a scheduled flight in there, and also to work towards a business plan so we can make the airport a more viable entity for the community. And then I had a meeting with the Chamber of Commerce, and their big concern was with the water situation and moving forward with that. So I let them know that there would be some information coming forward before the end of the year. And that's me. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Lamb. So we're going to go over to Roberts Creek and Director Howard.
Thank you. Director Ties advises that he is on a beach in Portugal and very happy to be there.
Yeah. And I'm here to report on his behalf. He has attended both the APC and OCPC meetings in Area D. There is discussion afoot on the OCP side around Section 18 of the Roberts Creek OCP, which relates to, in simple terms, increasing housing density to address housing stock. Two rezoning applications have lit up discussion on that issue, and he anticipates that the OCPC is actually going to consider that matter further and potentially bring forward thoughts for future amendments to the OCP. He attended a successful backroad trash bash in Area D and expresses appreciation to all those involved. Robin Cooper, BC Parks, State of Soils, and the conservation officers who are out there, and also expresses shame, shame, shame on everyone who dumps their trash, the B&K. Andreas, as you know, attended the UBCM, and I think someone noted this earlier today, also flags the question of whether all directors need to attend that meeting, and that we could reduce the cost of attendance by being a bit more targeted, and his appreciation to the staff and the support that they provided for the preparation of resolutions that were passed at the UBCM. And that's it from AAD.
Thank you very much for your inaugural report as this is your first meeting as the alternate. And we will go over to Area F and Director Hiltz.
Thanks, Chair Pratt. I'll do 1, 2, and 3. For me, as you know, one year in, UBCM was definitely an amazing experience to see the depth of local government in BC and how the issues from a pothole on your front door go all the way up to the federal government, well, the range. And so my best takeaway from that meeting was the roles of staff versus elected officials. And so this is a 4-word statement. Kind of staff tells you the what and the why, and the elected officials say the yes or the no. And this came out of just a mayor in a small town in the interior, and they say, how did you come up with all this stuff? And that was their statement. I go, that's the simplest one I've ever heard. 4 words. Why, what or why, yes or no. So I'm working with that one. Then to follow up that, the meeting with Cathette. Thanks for the CAO and the chair for arranging that to see that we have neighbors that we can talk to. You know, another fence that we're crossing over. Right? So that was really appreciative. And then the last fence, I guess, was the staff barbecue. You know, that was a terrific event. It was a privilege to serve the staff people food. Yeah, it was terrific. So.
Thank you. We're going to go over to Area E, and Director McMahon, please.
Well, I was at many of these same things, of course. My report on UBCM is up on my website. You all, I'm sure, read my last newsletter, so you'll know all about everything going on in Area E. And, of course, I went out to the Cathette lunch and the staff appreciation barbecue full of good food, good people. Last night was the Elphinstone Community Association meeting, and it was started out with Steve Sleep showing a TV show he did. He made, 12 years ago or so on the history of Mount Elphinstone. Really interesting, and he's planning to finish off and do a couple more. So that would be good. We got a big turnout for that. Of course, when it came to the director's report, they all left, but whatever. Then, of course, the big event in Area E was our beach cleanup. We had the whole Apocalypse Now thing going on Sunday with the helicopter and the search and rescue volunteers. That was awesome. And it was we should have sold tickets. You know, there were people lined up on the cliffs watching this. It was great. Then on Tuesday, I got the opportunity to get intimate with local garbage as we sorted the 46 totes of garbage brought off the beach. I have a lengthy list of thank yous on my website to people who were involved in this. It was really great. We did, by the way, it was everything and the kitchen sink. And the photo is on my website. We found the kitchen sink. So thanks to the Seashell Public Works Yard for giving us a place to sort, and to SERD staff, to Mark, Matt Trite, Remco, and Robin Cooper. And I am working with the group to bring back a report to the board on how this all went. We can now write an extensive report on how not to do a beach cleanup. And I'm getting some flack on Facebook for the fact that the helicopters, we burned I don't know how much fuel in order to clean the beach, and it wasn't the initial plan. So we now know better. But it is. The sheer amount that we got off, that's 2 kilometers of beach. And we got these 46 huge totes, of which a lot of it wasn't just styrofoam and plastic, a lot of plastic, but there was a surprising amount of metal and weird random things. So if you amplify that by the amount of beach we've got, especially beach that doesn't have road access, it's a real challenge. And how are we going to look at it? And how are we going to light a fire under provincial and federal governments to do more to help us out with marine debris? So you can find the photo of the sink on my website. Thank you.
Thank you, Director McMahon. It's certainly when you're trying to achieve zero emissions or net zero, and then the helicopter kind of ruins that. So I'll go over to my right. And
we were asked why we couldn't use kayaks instead of a helicopter.
Yeah, for one of those bins. Ooh, yeah. Okay, Director Seegers, please.
Thank you. We haven't been in a meeting for quite a while.
No.
Okay, so I only put a few things down. Chair Pratt and I we were invited to attend the signing of the Lehigh Agreement, 50-year agreement that the Sechelt Nation has put together with the Lehigh Corporation for the gravel lands. And one of the things they mentioned was, yes, they will take some of the money that they're going to be getting for day-to-day and current residents, but they're also planning on setting up a trust so that those coming forward would have access to funds from this agreement over time. In the District of Sechelt, we are doing a lot of the basic documents, getting them revised, things like our liquid waste management plan, our subdivision and development control plan, our zoning bylaw, we're looking at sewer functional plans, etc. All of those base documents. Right now we have documents that don't really reflect each other, and the community will read them one way, a developer will read them another way, and our staff read them another way, which makes for very interesting developments when they come forward and sets the community and the developers up against each other. So we're looking at aligning all of these so that they actually say the same thing. Surprise, surprise, it'll be quite interesting moving forward with that. Director Lamb mentioned our Water Resources Select Committee and our Airport Development Committee. I think we mentioned previously and was reported that we'd actually obtained $1 million grant for the airport. Mm-hmm. So we're looking at, we have had an engineering firm come out and do an assessment on the runway to provide us with a little more data so that we can actually go out to tender to actually get that work done. So that'll be going forward fairly soon. And Councillor McLean is in the gallery here. He is leading our Housing Advisory Committee meeting, doing an amazing job with that. We'll be moving forward with some projects there. One of the things that has come forward in response to Kayla Feenstra's request of our council was an affordable housing reserve bylaw. So we have funds right now, but we don't actually have a bylaw or reserve fund bylaw set up. So that's going through. What else? Took part in the Electric Vehicle Festival, that 5th year, I believe, this year. And it took up the whole schoolyard in Sechelt. So it started with about 5 vehicles 5 years ago, has really grown since then. There were motorcycles. They had one event where they had the Teslas they can dance kind of thing with their doors So they had a lineup of them and all dancing to the same song. It's kind of fun. You've talked about UBCM. I think we learned that there's power in collaboration and power in going together as governments up and down the coast. It was remarked on and has continued to be remarked on by those in government that we interact with after. So I think we will together make more of that happen in future years. So I look forward to continuing to work with you on those. Sechelt Arts Festival is on right now. I had the pleasure of opening the festival last week on Friday, and then also doing the opening address for one of the sessions. There's another, this coming weekend, there's a couple of things happening. There's Marvelous Mr. Moisey on Friday night. Saturday, there's some Latin dance music at the Sechelt Nation Hall. On the weekend, on the 14th and 15th, I believe it is, there's a free event at the Art Center, and it's immersion art. So I've never been to it, but the precursor was last year when the facilitator lit up the Seaside Center, and you could go by, and it had all kinds of designs on the outside of it. I don't know if you went by at the time. This is where you walk in and you're actually part of the art. So it's a free event. Go by, drop in for a short period of time, long period of time. I think it's 10 to 5 or something on Saturday, Sunday, Monday, something like that. Check that out. I'm going to stop by and see what that's like. Oktoberfest was a great event. After UBCM, I came back and I got to sell tickets at Oktoberfest. Great downtown event. It's getting bigger every year. A lot of people have a lot of fun. And then what else is coming forward? We gave first reading to the Evolve development, which is Downfield Road here, just north of the shopping center. It's going to be commercial, residential, and there's a proposal for 35 affordable housing units through BC Housing with that development. Lots of condos, townhouses. I'm looking at about 140 units, I believe they said, altogether. So moving some stuff forward. Hopefully we can get some more accommodation for those who want to live and play on the Sunshine Coast. So that's my report.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Well, it's been a busy month for all of us. So going back a bit, I'm just going to mention a couple of things that other people haven't. We had the landfill tour on September 13th. Director Seegers still has an injury from it. She got bit. But that was illuminating to see where our landfill is at. And it was good to see that, and thank you very much to staff for arranging. Other things, I've met with my Half Moon Bay Elementary Student Council, and we'll be doing that probably on a monthly basis because their first response was, "That was epic." So I'm like, okay. They really enjoyed it, so we'll be meeting again next week and making it a regular just conversation. And there's quite the group of kids. There's about 30 of them, and that was really illuminating for me as well. Also did the trash bash up in the Trout Lake, and shame on people in Trout Lake who ditch cars on Trout Lake and then light them on fire. And I think I've said this before in another venue. I cannot believe how small a car can get once it's been lit on, once it's burned down. It'll fit in a garbage bag with room to spare. So that was, I was going to use the word illuminating again, but I think you've used it twice already. So I also attended that same evening the Gibson's Public Market Gala, which was a great event. That they're continuing to go strong, and it's great to see how many wonderfully generous people we have in our community. UBCM, Library Board, I walked through Oktoberfest. It was too early in the day to drink, even though I felt like it after that very long week at UBCM. UBCM was really, it was really engaging, learned a lot, and I would agree that regional collaboration was, that Team Sunshine Coast approach was great.
September 30th, I had my own community dialogue in Half Moon Bay at Cooper's Green, and that it ended up being a little bit longer because the radio reported it as starting at 6 o'clock, even though it didn't start till 7, and I had people there waiting for me at 6 o'clock, so I'm glad I went early. And it was a really engaged group. We ended up having between 50 and 60 people there when you consider it was only about a week's notice for out in the newspaper or through email and Facebook, and having that big of an engagement. I've got 3 pages worth of notes. And it was all the way till 9 o'clock, and before, I think it hit 9 o'clock before people actually got up and left. So that was a really engaging session, really, I'm going to use, illuminating is the only word that's coming to my head right now. It's going to end up being like fulsome. The CATET meeting that we had last week was great. It was good to see so many members of not just their staff, but their elected come down. Really happy to have done the staff appreciation barbecue. That was it was great to see how many people came out, and I'll be sending. I'm going to have a couple of thank you cards that I'm going to need the board to write for Rotary and for a couple of special staff members that really helped out with that. I think we lucked out. We had nice weather. I laughed to, I said to GM Rosenboom, you know, I get the weather I want. Got rain in the summer when we needed it, and there you go. So let's just keep that going forward. And then one other thing that I did earlier this week was I attended the Area A Town Hall. Director Lee did a great job. They're a highly engaged group up there. Really good turnout in the community hall, probably about 3/4 full, maybe full. Didn't see behind me. I got pulled up into the front of got sat on the front row there, and when I tried to sit in the back, and they wouldn't let me. So, yes, we got our pictures taken with some residents, and I was offered to say a few words. I said no, and it was commented, well, you know, get a politician that doesn't want to talk. So, but anyways, it was a really great event, and so it was good to be there for that. So with that, I think that's all of our reports, and we do have one more business item before we go in camera, and that was number 11, Directors Meeting Compensation. We have the CATET meeting. We don't need a resolution for because it is an intergovernmental meeting, so it's taken care of. However, we do have the House Sound Forum in Squamish and the Climate Leaders Institute in Vancouver on November 7th and 8th. So the House Sound Forum on October 25th. We will do compensation, expenses, and stipend for anyone, but we need to have a motion to be proactive for that. But we need it to be explicit on who's actually going to be attending.
I don't know yet.
Okay. Director Hiltz, you're planning on attending?
I'm scheduled to be there, yeah.
Okay. I am not planning on attending. Director Lee, are you planning on attending? And I know Directors Ties and McMahon are planning not to attend because they're going to a different conference in Vancouver in November. So I guess it's just Director Hiltz, because if the regional or if the municipal directors go, it will be paid for by their municipal governments. Okay, so I need a motion that Director Hiltz's expenses and stipend will be paid to attend the House Sound Community Forum in Squamish on October 25th. So moved, seconded. And Director Lee, you said you weren't going to go? No, okay. No further discussion? All those in favor? Motion carries. Okay. Next, we have on November 7th, 8th, we have the Climate Leaders Institute in Vancouver. Directors Ties and McMahon are planning on going to that. And so may I have a motion for expenses and stipend for that? So moved, seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Motion carries.
Corporate officer, we're covered? Perfect, thank you. And with that, was there, and just please, any of these meetings, please make sure that you're reporting back to us so we can hear about all of the great learning that you're doing. That would be awesome. Okay, so next we're going to have a motion to go in camera, and then I will go to media and the audience if they have any questions. So the motion for in camera is that the public be excluded from attendance at the meeting in accordance with Section 91A, C, E, G, K, I, and 2B of the Community Charter, personal information about an identifiable individual, labor relations or other employee relations, the acquisition, disposition, or expropriation of land, litigation or potential litigation, negotiations or related discussions respecting the proposed provision of a municipal service, the receipt of advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, the consideration of information received and held in confidence relating to negotiation between the municipality and a provincial government or the federal government or both, or between a provincial government of the federal government or both, or and a third party. So moved, seconded. All those in favor? Motion carries. Media? Oh, okay. Well, first, the media tour is, we had to postpone the media tour. Okay. We did have to postpone the media tour, so I would suggest to speak with Remco or and find out when that will be rescheduled. And it was a wasp bite. Sorry. Yeah. No, it was weird though. It just happened while we were at the top of the pyramid. So, okay. No, nothing. You got nothing. You got nothing. All right. Okay. Are you eating more cookies? Okay. All right. Okay. We're just. Ow.
And are we next door now?
Next door. Terrific.